Okay, I'm back. Chronicle number 2 isn't going to be super exciting. It's really just going to set the stage for some of the, I guess, more insane things that have happened in my life. I'm not a person, and especially again, if you know me as your life coach or teacher, you'll hear me often say that I don't believe in judging things as good or bad or wrong or right. It just is, right? It's just part of the experience. And so really my gauge is dark and light. And the only reason I use that gauge is because I've experienced it. Because I know what it is to live in the dark and to remove that veil and see the world in an entirely different way. And so I'm going to just kind of set the stage for some of those darker experiences that were the things that I think cultivated the diamond, right? The things that created the pressure that I emerged out of. And so let's set the stage by taking you back to that first night, because I think it's super important that I share with you. We sometimes, I think, glorify this idea of a woman, getting on the stage and the sexuality and sensuality. And I'm not saying that this is a bad thing by any means, but I do also recognize, because I lived it, what it is to put yourself on display for judgment. And when you're young and vulnerable and you already have a low self-esteem and you're out there just trying to feed your child, and you're up for rejection, and how hard that hits when you know it's just based on the way that you look. And so somebody is just making a snap judgment and just no, and that you've got to just walk away and just take it. And so how do you put up a wall? How do you defend against what that can do? And we've all experienced that. I mean, everybody that has social media, we feel that. But now I was living it real time. I mean, I was showing up there as vulnerable as you can be, taking all of my clothes off just there in display, and experiencing all kinds of horrendous things. I know in my first week I had a guy who, I mean, it really it's interesting, and for me, this was a huge trauma back then, but this person had gotten several dances from me and then left. And there's just no explaining what that does to you when you're that naive and that young. And I was already feeling, insecure and all the things. But anyways, my first night, there was a girl there that was so kind. You always think there's angels everywhere, but she had taken me under her wing, and she had kind of said, all the things like, don't rob yourself a whole bunch when you're on stage, no matter what, you're probably moving faster than you think you are, so slow down, and just all these different sort of tips that, made it more technical, and that was helpful. And one of the other major tips she gave me is, they're going to check your bag. So every night when you come in, the first thing that they do is have you open up your bag and check it. And so she's like, so what I do is I keep a bottle in my car. And so I got to learn really quick that none of these girls, at least again, in that experience, were sober. Everyone had their sort of drug of choice or multiple drugs. And oftentimes that was sort of what the loop that kept them in it, because maybe they started dancing like me. They needed the money to feed their kids or to go through college, whatever it is their reason was. But then they started using so that they could show up, so that you can be, again, dealing with that level of judgment on the surface and put up this wall of protection. And so they're all using, and then eventually, what they're using gets a little stronger, a little bigger, and now they're just showing up to pay for that, and they're kind of the cat chasing the tail. And I watched that time and time again. So she had informed me, she keeps a bottle in her car. So I took that tip, and that used to be my thing. From time to time, I would do a couple shots in my car before I walked into work, and it helped. And then I just got really good at putting up the wall, at no longer caring. I would sort of walk up blank, do you want to dance, and not feel anything. I would just be ready for the rejection before they could even do it. You can't hurt me. And I got real cold real fast. But this whole alcohol under the seat thing. This is kind of like a big deal because of how it ended up sort of changing my life or my trajectory. I had a bottle underneath my seat, and again, this is really interesting because at this point I am 19, so I'm old enough to vote, to be considered an adult, to take care of a 2-year-old on my own, to to have a job that supports us and have family in the home and all of the things, but I couldn't drink alcohol. And I had showed up to a 18 and over club, and with some girlfriends, and we pulled up in my car, and when we got there, so that we weren't drinking and driving or anything, we just did a couple shots before we went in. So I did the shots in the car, and I don't know if the doorman saw this, or I have no idea, I just have to ask him. But when I walked up, he grabbed me and he goes, blow in my face. And I did. I blew in his face, and he immediately spun me around, put handcuffs on me, and took me to jail. And that was the day that I fell into the system. And I can tell you, I can speak from my truth, that once you fall into the system, it is almost impossible to get out. Impossible. The system is not set up in a way that it is assisting you or anybody, because keeping me off the streets like I was a criminal. I was just taking care of my child. I was doing nothing, and now I was in jail, and that thing, I could not get it to go away. It went on and on and on, and then I ended up with these fines that I of course couldn't pay because I could barely pay for the things that I had, and it's just like one thing after the other after the other. I ended up getting multiple tickets. They used to they knew my car, they'd pull me over. At one point I think I had 50, no joke, 50, yeah, 50 tickets. It was somewhere around $13,000 in fines. And again, here I am, a single mom, just barely making it. The club I was working at had gotten raided, and everything, they came in paddy wagons. They had done this undercover thing. They were videotaping everybody. It was so funny because my grandma called me up, and she was like, because what they did is they give tickets to everybody, calling it prostitution. Prostitution is if you're agreeing to do something that might get the other person aroused. So giving a dance, which is again what they know is happening in these clubs, was now illegal and considered prostitution. So my grandmother was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening," and I'm like, "Don't worry about it." So they ended up taking probably 30 girls, 40 girls away in paddy wagons. I had luckily snuck out onto the roof, and so I didn't get taken that night. But the club just about got shut down. They stayed open, but who's going to go to a club that has news trucks outside? So everybody kind of scattered for weeks. I just didn't know what I was going to do, and then several of us got together and began traveling, and there was this circuit that we got on, and so that became the setup, I guess, for the next iteration of me. It was me now in this new experience of traveling. Yeah, so we'll leave it there, and I'll fill you in on the rest in Chronicle 3.